Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. And Drew, we are back in the saddle with less than 48 hours until National Signing Day. And it's going to be a pretty loaded event from what we can tell already, Drew. We also got a Top 247 update coming at 3 o'clock Eastern. We'll get into that. The portal is off and popping as well. And Drew, Florida surging right now for a top 10 class, believe it or not, just a couple weeks after being ranked outside of the top 50. Drew, let's start at the top with that top 247 update. And Drew, I think we can go past the preview part and give a little bit of some low hanging fruit to maybe the consumers out there that might be foaming at the mouth a little bit, wondering what's going to happen with this update. We got some movement at the top of the board. It's not the number one spot, but the number two spot, occupied right now by Ohio State quarterback commit Tavian St. Clair. There's going to be a change at the top. Drew, enter Keelan Russell.
Yeah, Coop, I'm calling this a changing of the arms, right? Kind of like changing of the guard, right? Yeah, Bryce Underwood, he is going to keep that number one position. But the big news with this top 247 tweak, right? We're calling it a tweak before signing day, is Keelan Russell rising up to number two. And Cooper, his grade goes from a 98 to a 99. So 1, 2, 3, we have quarterbacks in the rankings. Bryce Underwood, Keelan Russell, and then Tavian St. Clair. All three of them have 99s. And we think these are guys that could be potential difference makers, not only on Saturdays, but potentially Sundays. We're looking at franchise type of individuals. And Coop, went back and I looked. I haven't been at 24/7 Sports since the start, but I've been here a long time. And never before have we had quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 and finish at the top of the rankings. So rare, uncharted waters. And I think with Keelan Russell, if you ask me, I think he's had the best senior season of anyone in America, completing 71.5% of his passes, just over 3,600 yards, 52 touchdowns to just 2 INTs. He's a dynamic mover. Loved what I saw from him this past Saturday, Duncanville, in the third round of the Texas 6A playoffs. He throws for over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. We've said it in the past. This kid reminds us of Jaden Daniels. He's the real deal.
Drew, it's a small change, but a significant change, right? Depending on who you ask. If you ask an Alabama fan, they're elated. If you ask an Ohio State fan, they're probably wondering why their guy got bumped down a spot. I want to bring this back to Elite 11 finals in Los Angeles, where we saw both these guys kind of side by side. And going into that event, Keelan Russell was a guy that we liked. We had in the top 64, even when he was committed to SMU. Did you ever think he would be in this spot, really pushing for one of the top players in the country? And what's it been like to kind of see this meteoric rise up into one of the, I would say, most convicted players on our board? Really, at the end of the day, I think that's what it comes down to. We get excited when we start talking about Keelan Russell.
Yeah, I mean, first time I saw Keelan Russell throw was 11 months ago at the Battle of Miami tournament down in Miami. It was like, all right, who's this kid committed to SMU? You watch him play. Football doesn't touch the ground, right? Then we see him at a few more camps. All right, it's looking good. And then he shows up to the Elite 11 finals, and you could make the case that, hey, maybe he should have been our alpha dog for the event. He ends up winning the title of Elite 11 finals MVP. He was our number 2 quarterback. And really, that's when I think he got himself into this conversation for that number 1 position. And if you want to compare it to another quarterback in recent cycles, how about DJ Lagway at Florida? You know, DJ Lagway last year in the middle of his senior season, we shot him up the board into our top 32. He ended up finishing as our quarterback number 1. And I think it's been the same thing for Keelan Russell. I say it all the time. He's an elite playmaker for the position. You know, he's a very dynamic mover, but he tries to win from the pocket. I also love his ability to feather that fine line between risk and reward. Not many can do it like him. He knows when he can take a calculated shot. At the same time, he knows when to throw it out of bounds. So really, you know, we kind of left this open the senior seasons. All right, how are we going to stack these 3 quarterbacks? And the guy we kept coming back to, Keelan Russell, is really good at the beginning of the season, and he's doing it throughout the year against some really good competition there in the Lone Star State.
I'm glad you mentioned DJ Lagway. Obviously, he's been the story of college football over the last couple weeks, and Florida's resurgence that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But Keelan Russell, Drew, you look at that quarterback situation in Tuscaloosa. What's it going to look like next year with Jalen Milroe off to the NFL? Kind of wide open. Austin Mack comes over from Washington. You got guys like Ty Simpson, the former 5-star, Dylan Lonergan as well. Keelan Russell, is special by all means. And Drew, I think this could be a guy that could play early in Tuscaloosa. We'll keep an eye on that. We mentioned Florida, Drew, and one of the crazier stories right now, not just in college football, but in college football recruiting. If you've been keeping up with it, Florida, Drew, it seems like they were dead and gone. You and I were talking about it. What are one of those programs that needs to make big time changes before National Signing Day comes? That was Florida, Drew. It wasn't just long ago that they were sitting there just outside with a little over 10 commitments. You turn the page, I think they're north of 20 now. They're sitting at number 12 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. And all of a sudden, just a few weeks ago, athletic director Scott Strickland comes out, gives his public support for Billy Napier. And Drew, I mean, you talk about the winds just being at Florida's back right now in terms of what they're doing. Florida has the hot hand, and you mentioned guys like Jaden Woods, TJ Dicey flipped from Auburn, Ty Jackson from USC, and Bacho, they flip him back from Texas, Byron Lewis, Tramel Jones, Stephon Shivers. Drew, they are on an absolute heater right now that I asked you in pre-production. I don't think I've ever seen this before. 7-5 can look a lot of different ways. If you're a 7-5 team out there, you want to look like Florida does right now.
Yeah, and Coop, I've been thinking about it. Okay, who have we seen this late push from in recent years? And it kind of reminds me of Ole Miss back in that 2021 cycle. Remember, that's when Lane first came out with the Mary Flipness shirt. He was wearing it on signing day. Hey, they finished 17th. And right now, you talk to Tom Loy, national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports. He thinks Florida can finish in the top 10. I haven't got into the class calculator here, but there's still some big names out there. Hilton Stubbs, top 247 safety that's committed to Miami. Lagonza Hayward, top 247 safety that was committed to Tennessee. Solomon Thomas, top 247 offensive lineman from right there in Jacksonville. Onus Kanabani, a cornerback that's originally from England, committed to Tennessee. Coop, what stands out to me, right? Not only does Billy Napier have a heavy spatula right now, and he's pulling guys away from different rivals and schools they normally have to recruit against, but I just love what Florida is doing on the defensive side of the ball. And you look at UF and that defensive front, really these past 3 games. I mean, they have had a sack party out there, and guess what? The Gators are going to return a lot of these guys. Cam James, I think he's a budding star. He's only a sophomore. You got LJ McCray, the former 5-star there, the 2 young linebackers, Miles Graham, Aaron Childs. Now you're going to pair them with this next wave that's coming in. We always talk about stacking recruiting classes. I love what they're doing in the front 7. Jaden Woods, not talked about a lot. That's a kid out of Kansas. He's someone on my freaks list, over a 40-inch vertical jump. Get a chance to see him with the Gators coming off the edge. I like the idea of that. Joseph Mbachu, defensive lineman out of Georgia, originally committed to the Gators, flips over to Texas. Now he's back to Florida. Hey, what makes Texas what they are that we saw it over the weekend? It's that depth on the interior of the defensive line. Joseph Mbachu is a developmental body. Same thing with Stephon Shivers. I just love it, Cooper. And then those 2 safeties, Lagonza Hayward, Hilton Stubbs, I think both of them fit what the Gators want to do on the defensive side of the ball. So it's been impressive, and I'm excited to see really how the next 48 hours go for them, because this is a big recruiting class for Billy Napier, and it's a sign of what's to come, I think, at the transfer portal.
You know what's interesting? I was watching Nick Saban over the weekend on College Game Day, a guy that Billy Napier used to work for when he was at Alabama. And Saban was talking about the importance of being process-oriented over result-oriented, and why that means so much, especially caring for his players and being able to stay steady amongst the chaos. Florida has been in the chaos. They've been in the eye of the storm, Drew, for really the last 2.5 years since Billy Napier's been there. Missing the on-field results. You think about the Jaden Rashada situation off the field. Your star quarterback goes down in Graham Mertz. You battle, Drew. You think about last year for Florida at this time. It was the complete opposite song in terms of where this was heading. They were trying to hold on to guys like DJ Lagway and LJ McCray. Now it's completely different in terms of flipping the script. Credit to Billy Napier, his staff, Jacob LaFrance, the general manager over there, the job that they're doing. He talks about keep chopping. That's exactly what Florida's done, Drew. They had an opening once they started to win some games. They got the public support of confidence from the AD, and all of a sudden, Florida's just been on a complete roll, really kind of picking and choosing their spots where they want to be. So credit to Florida, the job that they've done, Drew. Like I said, they're sitting at number 12 a couple of weeks ago. I think they were kind of parked outside of the top 50. So you want to talk about a team getting hot at the right time. That's Florida right now. Drew, a couple other big storylines. You look around college football, our friend Tom Lloyd, not with us today, but some crystal balls going in on some big names. And let's start at the top with a couple five-star prospects. Lincoln Cure, committed to Kansas State from Kansas, goes on a visit to Oregon. That crystal ball now is flipped to the Ducks. Five-star receiver Jerome Miles was committed to USC. Looks like Texas A&M is now the team to beat there. Drew, if those were to happen, what would that mean for Oregon and the Aggies?
Well, you look at Oregon's recruiting class right now, Cooper, they don't have a lot of individuals committed, but pound for pound, this might be the strongest recruiting class in the country. To me, Lincoln Cure would kind of be the icing on the cake for them. And we know how much the Ducks like to get the football to the tight ends. Terrence Ferguson, obviously, he's had a huge year there in Eugene. They got another guy coming in Kenyon Sadiq, and then you can follow it up with Lincoln Cure, who plays small man football. But you turn on the tape, this guy's doing everything you want him to do. Big outside wide receiver, catches everything that comes his way, also flips over and plays some safety. So Dan Lanning tends to finish strong. This is the guy he's sunk his teeth in, and it will be a huge addition to the Ducks. With Jerome Miles, fastest man ever to come out of the state of Utah. We thought this was a huge get for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans as they kind of try to reload in that wide receiver room. But for Texas A&M, they need to get better at that wide receiver position. I think we saw that over the weekend against Texas. Some of those guys failed to create separation. Jerome Miles hasn't played a lot of football, someone that's been dinged up as both a junior and a senior, but he's a potential game breaker and the type of guy that can certainly run out of defense.
Would be a huge get for the Aggies, Drew. We talked about this guy. Maybe one of our favorites, the availability, durability, obviously a little bit of an issue. A couple other names, Gavin Nix, top 247 linebacker, the crystal ball, now on the Ducks, to flip from Miami. Dalen Pinson, a guy that we like inside the top 247, took a visit to USC. So names right now, a lot of moving and shaking every time you get on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. A lot is going down. Tom Lloyd, Matt Zenitz, those are the guys to follow. Guys, stick around. The portal is popping, and we got some names for you to watch. Welcome back to the 105. The portal is off and popping, Drew, and a little bit of change of roles this year. I'm taking more charge in the portal along with Clint Brewster and the rest of the team, but it has been interesting seeing this unfold, Drew. I was driving back from Louisiana yesterday, back to Tennessee, 8-hour car ride, literally the worst day I could have picked to have driven back on 8 hours, and guys are just jumping in left and right. But let's start with the name that entered today, former USC quarterback Miller Moss.
Is this where I complain about the transfer portal rankings? Is this now that we have a name to put it to? This is where I complain about them.
This is it. I got broad shoulders. Put it on me. But let's talk about Miller Moss. Maybe you'll take exception with the grade that we put on him. But Miller Moss, a former USC quarterback, is now in the portal. Drew 5-5, 10 career starts at USC. Got replaced by Jaden Maeva a little bit later in the year. We knew this was kind of shifting in this direction. But it's kind of interesting. One, because what does the transfer portal quarterback market look like? You got guys like Matthew Sluka, Anthony Calandria, Thomas Castellanos, right? More names obviously going to jump in still early at this point. And then USC, Drew, this is really what I want to ask you about. Did Jaden Maeva do enough to keep his job next year? You got five-star quarterback Hassan Longstreet, who flipped from Texas A&M to USC. What does that look like? What were the things maybe promised to him in his recruitment, Drew? It's going to make for a pretty interesting domino effect, especially in Los Angeles, and that's where I want to start.
Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts on the Miller Moss thing, right? I wouldn't write him off. I know you gave him a 90 in the transfer portal, currently quarterback one. I think he's the most talented arm so far that is in the transfer portal, and I would defer to you there. So interested to see his market. Hey, remember, Kyle McCord was a cast-off, right? Now he leads the NCAA in passing yards at Syracuse. Yeah, but for USC, I know Jaden Maeva against Notre Dame, the advanced analytics, you look at the Pro Football Focus grade, it looks good, Cooper, but man, at the end of the game, you talk about two really bad throws there down in the red zone. I think for USC, they're going to have to bring in a veteran arm. And we like Hassan Longstreet. He's a five-star quarterback prospect for us. but he is far from polished, right? He is someone that needs some time. I think you could play him spot duty here and there as a true freshman, but if you're Lincoln Riley entering a pivotal 2025 season, I don't know if you hand the keys over to Hassan Longstreet. His final game of his prep career at Corona Centennial, 3 interceptions, 2 lost fumbles against Mater Dei. Yeah, that's a college defense, but not exactly an encouraging performance. So I do think USC, this was kind of the trial for Jaden Maeva. He could potentially get a bowl game here, but I'm not sure if their quarterback of the future is penciled in right now. They're a team I'm going to keep an eye on, right? Maybe as some more names enter the transfer portal.
I mean, I agree. You said it. Critical year for Lincoln Riley. I think he's coaching for his job in 2025. And you think about new AD, Jen Cohen coming over from Washington. She didn't make that hire. So pretty interesting. Is Jaden Maeva the guy? Can you put it all on Hassan Longstreet as a freshman? I don't think so, Drew. I think you just said it. I don't know if the quarterback for next season for USC is on the roster, which puts him in a really interesting kind of predicament. How do you handle that? We'll see what happens there. Drew, on the flip side, Miller Moss, already some teams that he's been linked to. I think one team pretty interesting to keep an eye out for is Michigan. And you talk about fit. I kind of wrote this about Miller Moss. I think you want to see more Clark Kent, less Superman, right? Put the cape away. You need a strong offensive line. You need a run game that you can lean on. And then really at the end of the day, just need you to kind of drive the bus. That's going to be the role for Miller Moss. Some late game decision making, critical moments. You turn on games against Penn State, Washington, Michigan, all throws that I think he would like to have back. But Drew, in the right environment, I think Miller Moss can get it done. And I think this is a guy, you brought up Kyle McCord. I think that's a great example of a guy that found the right fit, was able to bounce back. I think Miller Moss is going to be able to do that. Drew, maybe a guy that you and I haven't talked about a bunch, but sticking with quarterbacks, guy that you're familiar with because he kind of surprised us when he popped up at UVA, started playing early. Anthony Calandria, he jumps in the portal, has got an 86 rating, so really kind of outside that low-tier priority free agent in terms of how he projects, but projects as a power four starter. Drew, I'm watching him. The name that came to mind for me, John Rice Plumlee, a guy that played under Gus Malzahn at UCF, and a guy that can move around, a lot more athletic than you think, rush for over 500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. They got to clean that up in a big way, but this is the type of guy that I think fits a certain type of system. You brought up Florida State, not trying to pigeonhole anybody, but I wanted to bring that up because I was thinking the same thing too.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's from the state of Florida, and this is a kid I had a ton of exposure to when he was coming out of high school. I kind of called him like a value brand Johnny Manziel, and then you look up and he's playing as a true freshman at UVA, and he is a gunslinger, right? He will throw it into the teeth of quadruple coverage. He does not care. He will dial up the deep ball. So, there's some peaks and valleys to his game, but I think Cooper, he's kind of the perfect bridge quarterback. And you look at what's going on there in Tallahassee. Gus Malzahn comes over from UCF. He's going to be Mike Norvell's new offensive coordinator. They got 2 young guys we like, Luke Kromenhoek, who I thought did some good things over the weekend against Florida. It's hard to evaluate the quarterbacks behind Florida State's offensive line. They can't block anyone, right? So how do you really judge Luke Kromenhoek, Brock Lynn, the other name there? I think Florida State's going to want to bring in someone to drive that competition, right? That's the name of the game. You're only really as good as not only your number 1 quarterback, but your number 2 quarterback. Obviously, Florida State knows that from a few years ago. So Anthony Calandria would make a ton of sense to me. I also think Luke Kromenhoek fits what Gus Malzahn wants to do. He can run. This is a kid that was a former safety, right? This time last year, he was playing safety in the state playoffs. So, I think that'd be kind of the perfect marriage for Florida State if they wanted to go that direction.
Drew, another position that I would say is the deepest at this point, very early, but 13 guys that we have graded with an 87 rating or higher, guys that we kind of put in that winnable plus category, is a receiver position. And you talk about names like Kevin Concepcion that enters the portal from NC State, ACC Freshman of the Year for the Wolfpack, downtick in production as a sophomore. I don't think that's going to scare any teams away. Micah Hudson, the former 5-star, the first 5-star to sign with Texas Tech. That marriage didn't work out the way that we expected. 8 receptions, 123 yards. Drew, all of a sudden you look up, there's some pretty interesting names. You can go down to the group of 5 as well. Guys like Eric Rivers from FIU, you and I were talking about. I think this is probably going to be one of the deepest, if not the deepest position in the entire portal.
I got my eye on Kansas State for Kevin Concepcion. They just took a commitment from his younger brother in the 2025 cycle. I think K-State, maybe they're trying to get some weapons for Avery Johnson and hold on to the young budding quarterback there. So I got my eye on Kansas State for Kevin Concepcion. Coop, the one I want to ask you about, Micah Hudson, right? We heard all about him. The 5-star put up huge production numbers. He was on all the preseason freshman All-American lists, right? This is someone that held 5-star status in the 2024 cycle as a wide receiver. That is a big deal. And I think me and you, if we kind of go back and play revisionist history, some question marks, right? I think you can poke holes in the evaluation. Remember, at the Under Armour All-America game, only played or only participated in one practice. Where do you see him? What do you think the market's going to be? I think you got to go to the high school tape because he didn't get much burn for a Texas Tech team that, number one, threw the ball a lot and really wasn't that good.
We might have not been all the way convicted. That being said, Micah Hudson, an extremely productive player. I think the thing that stands out, if I remember correctly, you show up to Under Armour, he's got a hamstring injury, never really got to see him live and work out, Drew. And then when you think about all these guys in the portal, especially with the top-tier talent, there's something. I mean, you talk to the schools where these guys used to play. There's a character issue. There's an academic issue. There's an off-the-field issue. Micah Hudson is one of those guys. You look at Texas Tech, obviously with what's on the line, signing the first 5-star in history, you would think that this guy was going to get more snaps. That being said, the player in the market, Drew, I still think is going to be robust. Texas has been a team that's been tied to him in the past. I think you look at LSU, Cortez Hankton, Oregon as well. They've been super aggressive in the portal. I think those are the three teams that kind of stand out a bit. And yeah, even though it's a year later and we have high hopes for Micah Hudson, it's a little bit of cold water in what we thought was a generational year at receiver, right? You got guys like Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, go down the line, Ryan Wingo that we liked, all performed really, really early and played at a high level. Micah Hudson was one of those guys that is really kind of a little bit of a cautionary tale. What I mean by that, it doesn't mean that he's not going to go have a successful career. This is where all the preseason hype was. This is the guy that multiple people tabbed as, hey, he's going to be on all the freshman All-American lists. Had less than 10 receptions. It didn't work out the way that he thought it was going to work out. So in the NIL, in the transfer portal era, Drew, it's a little bit of a good story to kind of bring people back to reality. Not everybody's going to be Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams.
No, I agree. And Malachi Coleman, we can put him as another former blue chip guy. I'm hoping for a nice rebound for those individuals. I'm not giving up hope on Malachi Coleman and Micah Hudson.
Yeah, went back and forth on Malachi Coleman, straight line, vertical playmaker, started 6 games as a freshman, then redshirts this year, Drew. When you're evaluating these guys in the portal, it's just tough. Projection versus production, which way you want to go. We'll see. Be interesting to see how teams attack this as well. Guys, stick around. We got SEC Big Ten superlatives coming up next. Welcome back to the 105. Time for Big Ten SEC superlatives. This is coming off the heels of a little exercise that we do with the 247 sports scouting team where we cross-check each other's conferences. And Drew, a lot of this kind of stirs up good conversation, getting eyes on guys that we haven't seen before. So we thought we toss out some categories out there, maybe fill in the blanks of some classes that we like, players that pop, so on and so forth. And Drew, I want to start with you, but the most surprising positional unit for you in the conference that you had, the Big Ten?
Oh, Coop, I love this, right? Because we're going, around the country, coast to coast, kind of seeing some guys that, hey, maybe we didn't get eyes on, right? And I know a lot of people, well, hey, how have you not watched these kids? Hey, we're working with a pool of like 2,000 prospects. It's hard to kind of identify and write up every one of these individuals. My most surprising unit, right? And this was late last night. Long weekend for your boy, just grinding the tape. But I thought Ohio State's offensive lineman, yeah, they got a borderline 5-star prospect in Carter Lowe, But they have these two 3-star recruits that I really, really like. Jay Cook, in-state offensive lineman, wrestling background, 4.72 in the short shuttle at 300 pounds. You turn on the tape, he's an absolute mauler. Love his lower body flexibility. I think he's a potential multi-year starter, and I think he's a guy with some Sunday upside. So he's a riser for us in the rankings. Really, really good take for Ohio State. You think about Ryan Day, Mark Pantoni. They need to recruit the backyard in the name, image, likeness era. You got to find the guys that want to be Buckeyes, grew up wanting to be Buckeyes. I think Jake Cook checks off that box. The other one, Javon McFadden. Coop, we always use the term dancing bear, right? You see these big men with some agility. I mean, he's listed at 295 pounds. He moves like he's 225 pounds. A kid out of Maryland. Think he has a chance to potentially be a right tackle. I think you can play him at left guard, right guard, moves extremely well, light on his feet. Another one, great mobility. So I think for Ohio State, hey, it's not going to be the sexiest or not going to be the highest ranked kids, but I think 2-3 years down the line, we could look up Jake Cook, Javon McFadden, their start in the middle for Ohio State.
I'm right there with you. And the thing that comes up with Ohio State, you mentioned the wrestling background of one of these guys and the in-state ties. Drew, it's important that you recruit guys that this means a lot to. Both Michigan, Ohio State, they have national ties. They can recruit anywhere in the country. But when you recruit guys from the Midwest, it means more. And when you lose 4 straight to Michigan, Drew, it's got to be a little bit personal, especially in the trenches. I'm going to go with Texas A&M. I'm going to go with their offensive line as well. I guess we're both just point of attack guys. And Drew, not the most highly heralded group when you look at them in terms from a ranking standpoint, but guys that can do a lot of different things. Jonte Newman, an in-state guy that I think ultimately at the end of the day is going to be an interior offensive lineman, plays tackle right now opposite of Ryan Foji, another guy that we like inside the top 247. Marcus Garcia is certainly a name that comes up. Nelson McGuire that we have in the top 247. Tyler Thomas, Connor Carty, Joshua Moses. And, Drew, the Carty kid I want to talk about a little bit, plays guard, but I think this guy's a center all the way. These guys do a phenomenal job recruiting their home state. And when you have a state like Texas that produces more players per capita than any other state in the United States, it's important that you keep those guys home, Drew. And when you go through Texas A&M's class and you start combing through, you see, okay, here are guys that are tied to the program that have developmental upside. We talked about Mike Elko bringing a Duke identity to Texas A&M, place that maybe got a little bit over their skis with Jimbo Fisher, now reeling it in a little bit, getting back to their roots, recruiting Texas and recruiting it well with guys that fit their program to a T. So I love what Texas A&M is doing, especially on both sides of the line of scrimmage. But this offensive line, like I said, it might not be headlined by names at the top of the top 247 board, but guys that I think are going to be eventual multi-year starters for them down the line. Drew, the next superlative I have for you, foundational class, and obviously this means that this is pretty early on in a coach's tenure. But in the Big Ten, who do you look like and say, okay, this is where this team is going to plant their flag and this is where it all started?
I think if you're a fan of the 105, you've heard me go on this little rant before. Washington and Jed Fish, and they've had to play some defense here down the stretch, but you look at what made Jed Fish successful at Arizona, it was kind of really those first 2 recruiting classes. Those are the times he got Noah Fafita, he got T-Mac, he got the other, future first-round NFL players, and I think it's translated. He's doing the same thing there in Seattle, and, that transition class off to a bit of a slow start. Remember, they weren't hired, Jed Fish and all the guys he brought. They didn't come in until February, much later than others, but I think it's been impressive how they've closed out during the stretch. They got 2 quarterbacks committed. They got Jack Safer, a big offensive lineman out of the Dakotas. I think he's a potential multi-year starter there in the Big Ten. They got Ryland Dylan Allard, who's entering the top 247 for us. I think he's one of the top ball hawk safeties. Really good advanced eyes. He can read, tons of range with his track speed. Desmond Roback, another Arizona product. He is the state's all-time leading receiver. So for me, it's Washington. I think we're going to look up, hey, 2-3 years down the line, and Washington is going to be a problem for some people. I think they're building it the right way. They're going to supplement with the transfer portal, but you can tell from this group, they're getting guys with multi-year contributor upside, and that's the name of the game, right? You have to have a foundational baseline. You got to build the spine of your roster through the high school ranks. I think Jed Fish is going to do that at Washington.
I love that pick, Drew. And for somebody that worked at Washington, Drew, it doesn't look like the record's going to be broken for the top ranked class in program history. It sounds like Jed Fish is going to have to fight another day. That's okay. They'll get there
Like
eventually.
the 72 Dolphins, you're just going to pop a bottle of champagne on Wednesday night.
You know it for multiple reasons. Once that day is over, we'll be ready to roll there. But all right, Drew, foundational class for me. I'm gonna go with Auburn, and because it has to be, right? I mean, I could have said this last year. I think Auburn had one of my favorite classes, and we've seen those guys play. Sylvester Smith, Caleb Harris, Demarcus Riddick, the Fab Four of the freshman receivers. Drew, they've all had their moments. I think this is another year in state for Auburn where they've been able to take advantage. And you look at what they've done at the quarterback position with Deuce Knight, they're going to have to hold on to here over the next 48 hours with Ole Miss pushing. But really, the defensive line, Malik Autry, you look at guys like Jordan Crawford, you look at guys like in Antonio James and Nathaniel Marshall, and then guys on the back end. Eric Winters, Anquan Fagans, Drew. I love what they have done in the Yellowhammer State, keeping these guys home. Guys that are position versatile, heady players, guys that I all think can play early. And then you go outside of the state. How about Donovan Starr, Blake Woodby? They got a good feel for what they want in the secondary. Alvin Henderson, one of the most productive running backs we've seen in the entire country in quite some time. So, Drew, they're obviously loaded up at the skill position with what they did last year. This just seems like a little bit of a grittier, tougher class here.
Yeah, and Deuce Knight, the quarterback as well, right? You know, he's a lottery ticket, right? Boom or bust. Got to hold on to him here over the next 48 hours. But I think Hugh Freeze, with the success he's had in the past, you think about Malik Willis, a guy that's moving around, you know, Deuce Knight's certainly one not to write off there.
All right, Drew, let's go back to most complete class, which I love this because there's so many times you're looking at classes inside the top 10 and you say, all right, how do we differentiate these guys? But there's some you get done looking at 25 guys and you're saying, you know what, I feel better about this class, maybe better than a class that's ranked ahead of them. Did you have that feeling with any one of these guys in the Big Ten?
Yeah, you know, I kind of went back and forth here. I think you can make a case for Oregon. I think you can make a case for Ohio State. I'm going to go with Michigan, right? And obviously, they have the number one ranked player in the country, Bryce Underwood, the quarterback. There's plenty of questions, not only about the short term, but long term of that quarterback room. And I think Bryce Underwood is a guy that you're going to see on your TV screens in 2025, even if they add a Miller Moss via the transfer portal. He's ready to go. Elite athlete, dual threat. Think you can get him some situational packages, much like Florida was doing with DJ Lagway and Graham Mertz there. So you got him. Then you got a five-star offensive tackle and Andrew Babalola. Probably more of a longer burn, but he's a guy that's going to potentially be able to protect the blind side at the game's highest levels. An elite, rare athlete, Sharon Moore, he needed to get Andrew Babalola. He's got ties to Kansas. He gets that one done. And then really, Cooper, I mean, you can go up and down the board. Jaden Sanders, a big frame cornerback out of Texas. I love that take there. Elijah Dotson, in-state safety, was committed to Pittsburgh. I think he had some of the best senior tape when you're looking at these defensive backs. They made some strong evaluations. Andrew Marsh, another guy they're going to have to hold on to, wide receiver from the state of Texas. So to me, it's Michigan's class. And the more you get into it, right, you get to the back end and you're like, okay, I understand why they took Eli Owens, a nasty blocker of an H-back. That fits the Michigan brand. He's a Michigan man. Chase Taylor, linebacker out of the Peach State. You know, he's a guy that we had pretty low, just moved up in the three-star rankings. Is he a linebacker? Is he an edge rusher? I don't think it matters. He's got developmental upside. So I really how this came together for Michigan down the stretch. You can tell they leaned heavy on the senior season evaluations. And once they got Bryce Underwood committed, that allowed them to go out and flip some of these other prospects that they had, hey, maybe, 2-3 months ago, they wouldn't have had a chance with.
I think you and I, a couple of weeks ago, both said that Michigan was underachieving. I could be wrong there. At least I did. They go out, they flip Bryce Underwood, Drew. They've been on a roll there just in terms of what they've been able to get done. You got to give credit to Sharon Moore, Sean McGee, their general manager, Sam Popper. It's been a full team effort in terms of what Michigan's been able to execute. Still some guys on the board. 5-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood, not going to sign in December. It's going to be an interesting one to follow as well. Drew, for me in the SEC, I'm going to go with LSU. This might be a little bit of a shocker considering the number one player in the country flipped to Michigan, but you go down the board And there is a lot to like. JT Lindsey, Harlem Berry at the running back position. Frank Wilson always recruits those guys well. Derek Meadows, is he going to hold on? Even if you go outside of that, guys like Teron Francis, Philip Wright, guys from Louisiana, Jace Thomas from Destrehan, Drew, they have done a really good job in the state. Mike Tyler, another guy they got to hold on to. Really, this secondary is kind of what I want to prop up here, because this has been the issue over the last couple of years. They've been able to kind of piece it together. Guys like Ashton Stamps have come along. Guys like Zy Alexander playing well, transfer from 2 years ago. But guys like Cade Phillips, DJ Pickett, Aiden Anding, Jacob Bradford, that's where you start, right? LSU has been known as DBU, and a lot of that has to do with Corey Raymond and the legacy that he's built there over the last however many years he was there, before he had that quick stint in Gainesville with Billy Napier. To have him back in the boat, I think, has been colossal. Yeah, you can't understate it for LSU. And I think Blake Baker is the guy defensively that's going to build this unit up. You've seen them make strides. They've obviously had trouble at times with running quarterbacks. And I think a big part of this is, how do you get more athletic at the second and third level, speed and space backwards? Who can you play next to Whit Weeks? And ironically, you got his brother reclassifying, where all the Weeks bros are going to be there together. So I look at LSU, Drew, just in terms of the athletic profile. I get super, super excited. Not to mention, this is going to be a team here that I think is going to be one of the biggest buyers in the transfer portal market as well.
Oh, you didn't even mention two of my favorite prospects out there. Carius Kern, offensive lineman out of Arkansas. He just kind of fits what they want to do up front. Guy that can do a standing backflip at 300 pounds. And then, hey, Harlem Berry, our number 2 ranked running back, or excuse me, our number 1 ranked running back. He's lightning in a bottle. Reminds me of Shade McCoy. You think about Caden Durham already being there in Baton Rouge. No, I completely think you hit the nail on the head with LSU. Aiden Anding, Cade Phillips, I think those are guys that can play as true freshmen. And the thing is, LSU needs them to play as true freshmen.
Absolutely. Big year ahead in Baton Rouge for Brian Kelly. Some could say make or break. I'm not calling that yet. Guys, stick around. We got 2025 freshman predictions coming up after the break. Welcome back to the 105. Time now for some 2025 freshman predictions. Drew, I know you and I enjoy this, and no time to spare here, so let's get into it. One of those conversations here that you and I were having, who could have a Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith type impact? And I'm kind of eager to get your answer. So I will give you the tee box here, because I know I have a very firm stance on this one.
Well, the answer is there is no Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith or Cam Coleman or Ryan Wingo or TJ Moore. Now, give us, 6 weeks after the Under Armour All-American game, the Polynesian Bowl, the All-American Bowl presented by America's Navy. Maybe one of these guys, we'll fall in love with. But right now, we just haven't seen that true difference maker. And Cooper, I think this speaks volumes to how good Ryan Williams is, to how good Jeremiah Smith is. So I don't really have a name. I don't know if there's an offensive skill player that I can point to right now and say with confidence, hey, in 2025, this guy is going to be out there making plays against the best of the best. So I don't know. You got an answer?
Not really, not a direct one. I think Jonah Williams defensively, maybe you can kind of get on board with that. I mean, I think he is one of the more unique athletes that we have seen, regardless of position, in a very, very long time. You talk about a multi-sport guy, baseball background, would be a high MLB draft pick. What's he going to look like in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense? If you were to stick at receiver, Drew, there is nobody there outside of, maybe you get outside the top 32 and you say, all right, I can talk myself into Vernell Brown, right? What happens to Trey Wilson? Can he stay healthy? But certainly a guy that can stretch the field that I think is going to benefit from playing with DJ Lagway. So I think the safe answer is to say Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. They don't come around very often. But if they did defensively, maybe they'd look a little bit like Jonah Williams. Drew, the one other topic here I wanted to ask you about, who kind of fits this DJ Lagway category? What I mean by that is not instant impact, but who is the guy that is most important as a freshman to their head coach and potentially their job security?
All right. Well, I know what your two answers are here, and you picked the number 1 player and the number 2 player in the class. Good job, Cooper. So I'm going to go way outside the box. Malik Washington, quarterback that is committed to Maryland. The Terps have had to fend off plenty down the stretch. Michigan sniffed around before they got Bryce Underwood committed. Penn State has been lurking. He's a local kid. I think this is so important for Mike Locksley, who is entering a big year there in College Park. And Malik Washington's been a guy that has risen up the board. We liked him at the Elite 11 finals. We shoot him up all the way to number 50 in the rankings. He goes and he ends up winning his third straight championship as a senior. What's the player comp for Malik Washington? I think he's got some Cam Ward to his game in terms of how he changes the arm angles, how confident of a mover he is in the pocket, and when he needs to take off. He can beat defenses with his legs. This is a kid that was on my freaks list, right? He won a dunk contest, right? A quarterback won a legitimate dunk contest a few years ago. He's a special athlete. And I just think for Maryland, which needs a spark, needs to figure out ways to win games in the Big Ten, I think Malik Washington is a guy that you cannot redshirt, right? He is the future of that program. So I'm going to go with Malik Washington.
I love that pick. Like you mentioned, I went with the low-hanging fruit. I think Bryce Underwood, 12 million different reasons why he's very important. So we know that. How about Keelan Russell, though, Drew? We just bumped him up to the number 2 player in the country. And I said it's starting to look like Alabama might have to go with a young guy. It's going to be interesting. How do they finagle this situation? Do they bring in another quarterback? And if they did that, how does that really impact a guy like Keelan Russell? There's just so many different things that you have to look at. Drew, from a experience standpoint, from a competitive temperament standpoint, I do think Keelan Russell is one of those rare guys that can play. And I think Kalen DeBoer is going to need that. I think that's going to be really important to their success. One of the last ones I want to hit on here because it's important. I want to make sure we get this on video. But one of your favorite recruits, maybe one of the best in the country, we don't talk about enough.
I'm going to go with Tyshawn Willis, edge rusher out of the state of Mississippi. He's headed to play for Jeff Levy and the Bulldogs there at Cooper. I think when I brought him up a few months ago, a lot of people were like, Tyshawn Willis, he's 6'1". That doesn't matter. This kid has like 40 tackles for loss, 16 sacks as a senior. Mississippi 1A football player of the year. He is a DPR, right? Designated pass rusher. You can use him in sub packages early on. Kid on my freaks list holds the Mississippi 7A state record in the deadlifts. He's got a pair of silver medals in the shot put, 4.2 in the short shuttle. I love this guy. I think people are overthinking it, right? They think he's a tweener, but he can get after the quarterback.
I love that pick, and we're going to see him at Alabama, Mississippi here in just a few weeks in Mobile. Excited to see him. He is a horse. Drew, I'm going to go with Chase Linton, committed to Georgia. I think I brought him up a number of times. I think last time we had an update, I said, Drew, I think this guy could be a 5. I know it sounds crazy, but I've dug into the tape. I love the traits. What's that? Oh, well, hold on. We'll be all right. I mean, that's why we're talking about it right now. But just in terms of the length, the athleticism, the flexibility, the biggest thing is you see the leap from his junior to his senior season. And then you say, all right, now this guy's going to go into Georgia's strength conditioning program. He's going to add some weight, and he's going to get coached by some of the best coaches in the country. That gets you really, really excited about the idea of Chase Linton, what he can be. And Drew, I think both you and I think that he can be a special player at the next level. No exception to what we've seen with Georgia. Guys, stick around. We got final thoughts coming up next. Welcome back to the 105. We are less than 48 hours until National Signing Day. So a lot of moving parts, Drew. And I think we use this time to talk about who are some teams that we should be looking out for, not just the Floridas of the world that are finishing strong. Obviously, we know Oregon can do that as well with Dan Lanning, the Danimal, but maybe some teams potentially trending in the other direction that you have your eyes on here, Drew.
Yeah, I think Miami comes to mind right away, Cooper. Obviously they don't get the job done over the weekend at Syracuse, and that dings their college football playoff hopes. But you kind of read it inside the U. Gabby Arudi and those guys that cover Miami for the 24/7 Sports Network. It looks like Miami's playing a lot of defense here in the 11th hour, trying to hold on to Hilton Stubbs, the safety, Gavin Nix, the linebacker. Oregon's kind of sniffing around there. I mean, normally, Mario, you always call Grinch stealing recruits. Kind of a reverse of it, right? Who are they going to try to reel in? He's good for a splash, but at the same time, can they hang on to these individuals that have been committed for so long?
You just wonder if the calendar changing and then playing a game last week just shifts the mentality. I mean, Miami wins against Syracuse. They're in the ACC championship, but they all but have a college football playoff appearance wrapped up. So you kind of wonder how that maybe kind of fits into the psyche there for Miami. Drew, I'm looking at Florida. We mentioned them, Oregon as well. How about LSU? How did they finish? I think DJ Pickett, Derek Meadows. You look at guys like Mike Tyler, a 3-star tight end that I love as well. LSU going to be a team to watch. Keep an eye on Miami too. Guys, just a reminder, you can find the 105 every Monday and Wednesday. Monday right here on CBS Sports Network. Wednesday on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. And wherever you find all your podcasts, Andrew and I will be on CBS Sports or 247 Sports YouTube channel on Wednesday. Guys, we appreciate you watching. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. See you next time.